Welcome to a new Paradigm of Education podcast. I'm your host, Monique Sayers, along with Jennifer Zash. Today, we have a very, very special guest with us. Her name is Janet Philbin. A new Paradigm of Education is all about change within education. It's about leadership. It's about rising into empowerment. It's about creating a new pathway for the generations of the children to come. I feel like Janet's message is so powerful in what she has to share. She's a conscious parenting coach. She's the author of Show Up for Yourself, which is an amazing toolkit for educators and teachers. She herself is a parent as well as a conscious parenting coach, a clinical social worker, and a hypnotherapist. So I'd love to welcome you to this podcast, and I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself, Janet.
Oh, thanks, Monique. Hey, Jen, it's so good to be here. You pretty much said it all. You know, I've been in the field for 30 years now. I've been a social worker for 30 years. 22 of those years have been in private practice, helping people deal with life struggles. I spent many, many years working with parents-to-be, working with people struggling with infertility and helping people cope through life crisis. And now I've kind of transitioned a little bit more and really focus on helping people heal their own internal wounds so they don't show up and interfere in our lives now, whether that's at work, if you're a teacher with your students, if you're a parent with your children. So that's really what I do and who I am. And I am also a mom. I have 3 kids. My oldest 2 are out of college and my youngest is a high school junior. So I understand it from a mom's side. I understand it from a professional side. So hopefully I can bring some support to your listeners.
Yeah, I'm curious, as a mom and a conscious parent and highly conscious human being, showing up, I think, in every step of the way, regardless of what role you play. Having known you now for at least a few months, it's hard to keep track of time, especially during the pandemic. But what has the school system been like for you that your children have been in? Is it it's a traditional model, right?
Yeah.
And what ages are they again, if you don't mind sharing?
No problem. I'm in a traditional public school system here on Long Island, New York. My oldest is in her last semester of graduate school. My middle guy graduated college in the spring, and my youngest is a junior in high school. Yeah, so overall, we really were lucky. 2 of my children are special education students, and I really have felt that the district from elementary school through high school really did a really good job. I mean, my oldest, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, she's graduating from graduate school and she's already teaching as an adjunct at college where she's in graduate school. And this was a child that had a complicated IEP because of how her learning disability showed up for her. So for me, every time I spoke to an educator in the school about my children who needed extra support, it wasn't about what's wrong with them, because I don't believe anything is wrong with anybody. But I believe we're all hardwired in certain ways, and that makes all of us different types of learners. So I never cared about grades. I still don't care about grades. They don't really matter to me. Yes, they matter to get into college. I get that. But grades do not define who you are. And what was always more important to me that I really emphasized with the teachers and that I've really emphasized with my children is learn how to learn in a way that works for you, because your brain works your way. So you have to learn the way you're going to be successful for you, because my definition of success can't be your definition of success, in order to make this work. How can you be successful? How can you find confidence? How can the kids develop agency and independent in their learning styles, learning abilities, and develop those strengths, because it doesn't really matter to me what the school system says. What matters is how are you going to learn within that so you do well. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, just for our listeners, and I'm also from Long Island and New York, USA. So an IEP, and having been in the school systems myself as a school psychologist for 20 years, we don't realize how many times we use these acronyms, but an IEP stands for an individualized education plan. And any student who is receiving any sort of special education services has a plan. And it's broken down for that particular individual in terms of their strengths, their areas of difficulty that are going to be addressed through a variety of services, whatever it's felt by that school district is needed. As part of my sort of new paradigm of education vision, I have this sort of dream, if you will, that every student has an individualized education plan, because I think it, we are such individuals, and having worked with so many special education students over the 20 years in that context as a school psychologist, there was only a handful that didn't let it really define them, that stigma of receiving special education. And I think if everybody had this plan, it would be less separation, as well as this constant sort of refinement and monitoring and beautiful partnership and collaboration between the students and home and the educators of how to most facilitate what lights that child up is sort of, what I dream of. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, even though it sounds like the school district that your children went to, that they did really well there.
Yeah, they did. And I actually love that idea, Jen. If each child had their own individual plan, that would nurture their individual strengths. So a strength-based plan based on that individual child's innate gifts and abilities, and build upon that and have that in a positive light. Because even a child who is an A+ student, who's in honor classes or college level classes in high school, those kids have things they struggle with too, right? But because the grades look great, right? They're A+ kids, A+++ kids, no one thinks they're having a problem. But
That's
I'll
right.
guarantee you those kids are probably riddled with anxiety. Because once you have those A's, you always have to have the A's. And who am I if I don't get the A? So where's the individualized support emotionally, right, for those kids? Because then they get to college, those kids, and some of them fall apart because the pressure is too much, or maybe they never had to work hard in high school. High school was easy, even honors classes, but they get to college and no one ever taught them how to be a student and manage emotions. So I actually love that so much. That is actually very exciting to me.
Oh, that's great to hear. Monique.
I wanted to jump in and just say that I totally honor and agree with what you're both sharing. And what I wanted to share is what you're doing already in your Show Up for Yourself book is applicable within schools, because I feel like the role of the parent, first and foremost, is to educate children. And we were talking in the background a while ago about how the moment you stepped into being a conscious parent, that moment in time, how much it changed your child. So for you to then embody that aspect, for then your child to show up in that way, to then be able to apply those innate skills or not innate skills, whatever you want to call them, those skills that you've been teaching them, that would also be helping them in the school and out of the school. And I feel like that in itself is a curriculum. I'd love to hear about that. I'd love to hear what are those things, because myself as an educator and a parent, I'd like to learn, like, what else can I be doing that makes me more conscious, makes me show up better?
Yeah, I think we have to start by tuning into ourselves. So if your child comes home from school with a grade that you're not happy with, whatever that might be. For some parents, it might be a B. For some parents are like, we're good, just don't get an F. And, they come home with that grade that you don't like. If you want to really be conscious and be able to connect with your child and help your child and support your child, you can't react to the grade. So if you want your child to get no less than a B, and I don't know where you got that standard from, but wherever that came from somewhere. Your job as a conscious parent is to first ask yourself that question. Why is it that it's unacceptable for them to get less than a B? Were you punished if you got less than a B when you were a kid? Was the fear put into you, you're never going to go to college, you're never going to make anything of your life if you don't at least get B grades, that your worth as a human was tied to your grade? And if that's the energy you're coming from, don't open your mouth to your kid, because you're just projecting your own childhood pain right onto them, and you're recreating a pattern of emotional woundedness from your parents to you to them. And guess what? They're going to continue it into the next generation. So it's up to us as conscious parents to break those patterns. And the way to do that is to have awareness. And if you're going to have a framework for your child as to, what's good, medium, and bad, like, you better be in alignment as to why that's true. Because if you are looking at your child and defining who they are based on the grade they get, they're never going to be able to live up to that standard. Who can live up to that? I think if we look at what happened with Simone Biles in the Olympics, in the 2021 Olympics, I think it's such a good reference, right? Because here is an elite world athlete. Michael Phelps went through the same thing with swimming a couple of years earlier, who the pressure is too great that you can't fail, and your identity becomes wrapped up in who you are as this person that has reached success. So who am I if I am not the student that gets the A or a B, or mommy or daddy aren't happy with me if I got 4 wrong on my spelling test, I'm only allowed to have 1 wrong. Then we have a child coming home who's afraid to talk to you, right? So before you open your mouth, before you set these arbitrary rules, because really, if you look at them, they're arbitrary. You have to look inside yourself first as a parent, and what's coming up within me, for me, and about me first, because this is all about you. It's really not about your kid. The kids are perfect. There's absolutely nothing wrong with your child. It's your own woundedness that we're projecting. I hope that makes sense. I hope I explained that well. Okay, good.
And what do? You brought up fear just as I was thinking it. It was like you pulled it right out of my mind. What do you say to the parent who says, yes, but my job is to prepare this child for life, and I don't want to sell them short, and I want them to reach their potential, quote unquote, right? And they're not really, they don't even know what you maybe mean by awareness, because they really believe that they're doing the quote unquote right thing, or right by their child. And so do you have any sort of wisdom to get those parents there in a way that they can receive it, and to challenge, gently and consciously some of those fears?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jen. Fear is just an outward projection of our own internal anxiety, right? There's lots of acronyms for fear: face everything and run, and a few others that, right, just as I went to say that flew away, so I don't have them. But we don't ever want to give in to fear. But parents are not afraid of what's happening in the now. None of us are, right? Us, whatever it is, whether it's our children in school, the next event we have to go to, our job promotions, or how we're just functioning at work. We're not really afraid in the now. All the fear is about what's going to happen in the future. So the pressure on the children about grades, be involved in extracurricular activities, sports, volunteer, get a job, do well on your standardized testing. None of that is about what's happening in your 6-year-old life now. People are worried about their 6-year-old, what's going to be when they're 16. And everyone is trying to have this safety net so their kids don't fall or fail. Because the parents think they have to rescue the kids. But your children are not going to learn how to be self-reliant. They're not going to develop agency. They're not going to develop confidence in themselves, trust in themselves, if you don't let them fail. How are they going to know how to bounce back from a C grade if they don't get a C grade? And this is fun. Like, this is fun. Like, Monique, like, this is what's happening right now. Like, this is beautiful. This is, in conscious parenting, we accept the as-is of the moment. We have a beautiful little child with her recorder. She's just in the moment. It doesn't matter to her that her mommy's trying to do a podcast. I know if someone's listening, they can't see, but Monique's child is behind her playing on the recorder. And it's amazing because the child's just in the moment and has done nothing wrong. Right? So if we can just step into and accept what's happening in the moment, there's no reason to get upset about it because this moment passes. Right? And we just play with the form of it. That's all we have to do.
Yeah,
so that was a really long answer.
That was a great, and I'm glad that you told our audience members who may not be watching this, but only listening. Yeah, so Monique's daughter just kind of appeared and children, and Monique, I have to say too, because I've been on many calls with her and she just so beautifully allows for that. And I, as a psychologist, want to immediately set up the biofeedback machine on her and wonder what's going on in her body, because, you know, we have these still societal norms and expectations, and it's trying to balance all of that, right, Janet? And so because we're so conditioned since birth with traditional model of parenting, of education, and of all of it, right? And so when we show up differently, even if we know in our core that challenging that is a healthier way, it can still, the body, it still can be a little unfamiliar, right? So you know, I read your book and it's amazing, and I wish everybody could read it, truly. And if you could maybe apply, I shouldn't even say apply, but maybe kind of bullet point what would stand out the most, if you can kind of like just pull a couple of the most powerful guidance tips for our listeners. I know that might be a tall order, but sometimes the most simple tools are really the most impactful, right?
Yeah. So some of the feedback I've gotten on the book, the positive feedback I've gotten on the book, were two things. One section of the book where I talk about what is blocking you from healing and growth. And there were 4 main things. Not feeling worthy, our attachment to anger. People don't realize they're attached to anger. I'm going to forget them, and that's really sad. But
okay.
There's a lot of
now everybody has to buy a copy of your book, right?
Yeah. I could open it up and look at it. Shame and guilt. We have these big, powerful emotions that we have given away our power to, in a way, and we begin to believe these thoughts and things about ourselves, but those beliefs really aren't real. They've been created over many, many years, beginning usually in childhood, because we have to learn to survive in some way and cope with the environment we're living in with our caregivers, whoever our caregivers were. So whether someone was significantly abused in some way, shape, or form, physical, emotional, sexual, maybe a child was just ignored. Maybe they were never hit or yelled at, but always ignored, never paid attention to. Maybe you didn't feel loved. Maybe mom and dad just worked all the time, and because they were never home, you developed ideas about who you must be because they were never there, even though nothing quote unquote bad happened to you. So there's a whole myriad of reasons why we develop these blocks within us. Low self-worthy is almost always at the core of what I find with all of the people I work with, no matter what their presenting problem is. And that you become as an adult. We have, but they're not true. So I talk about in the book a lot the false self, which in Eastern philosophy would be the ego. Even though if we were talking about psychology, Freud's ego is very different. So I'm not talking about Freud's ego. So I really like to be clear about that. I'm not talking about that ego part of us in Western psychology, but in Eastern philosophy, the ego is the false self. And it is there feeding you these lies. But we don't know their lies until all of a sudden you have an awareness like, wait a minute, why am I actually believing that? Is that really who I am? And I will guarantee you it's not. But it's a coping skill. So until we identify it, oh, that's just a coping skill, oh, that's just a thought, then we can't begin to unwind it and unwrap it. And one of the other important pieces of the book that I've gotten a lot of good feedback on is my theory in the book, The Spiral of Healing, which has 4 components: feel, heal, grow, and love, that don't go in order, that happen simultaneously. But I just break them down so people can understand that healing is a spiral that we go up, and it's actually something that happens from the inside out. And to heal, to reach that place, we have to be able to feel what's happening within us, because feelings are just sensations in the body. We actually have to be able to find healing, which means what's going to be different for us now that we're aware of this inner landscape. We have to be able to grow, which allows us to break free from all of those trappings of the ego I was just talking about. And then we have to come into love, which is loving the self, which is self-care. So I think whether you're a parent, an educator, or anything else you do in your life, all of these components about who we are apply, because we can't just separate ourselves. You know, if we're in anger, that's going to come out at work. I mean, are you a teacher that is short-tempered or not patient with the kids? Or maybe you ignore the kids, just really bug you the wrong way. Why is that? You know, we want to always come back to our heart space, but if we don't have room in our heart for ourselves, it's very hard to have room in the heart for somebody else. I'll stop talking there.
No, that's so beautiful. And I had forgotten about the spiral. And that was a really, really powerful part of the book, probably for me, the most impactful now, at least that I can remember, until you bring the next beautiful point in there. So just to kind of recap, it was heal, feel, grow, and love. Did you say? Yeah. I think that's just so powerful. And I love the simplicity in there. And people are so scared to feel, I think. And so we avoid and we avoid and we avoid. And the reality is, and you know this in your work that you do, that when we stop avoiding it, it's not so scary. And I had an aha moment as you were sharing too, just about the parallels between therapy and mindfulness and meditation, that they really do serve a similar purpose. In psychology, we call it like the blind spots that, you know, we're coming in as a therapist to help them see, because they've only ever known that story and that version, as all of us, right? We all only know the lens in which we see the world, and that has also been conditioned for us. But when we have somebody objective coming in, or through the through the tool of mindfulness, that observer, with metacognition, being able to observe the observer, to sort of, sit on that rock and watch the water go by. I really, for the first time ever, just completely saw them as similar and so parallel. Because I think very often, not to minimize the power of therapy, because I do obviously think it's very can be transformative. But the fact that we can also be empowered and have the tools within ourselves to be able to do a lot of the same work, so to speak. Would you say that that's accurate?
100%. Yeah. I have a whole chapter in the book on meditation. It's super important because meditation is looking within, right? It's like you're opening up your own window to your own soul, to your own heart. And so we have to connect with ourselves. We can't connect with others if we're not first connected with ourselves. So it starts here. It starts in our very own heart. So 100%.
I love that. Anything else in terms of, Monique, I don't know if you wanted to share or ask anything. But just in terms of, like, you brought up the classroom teacher, right? Who it's going to come out in the classroom if she's not in touch with her emotions and her story, right? But I think our teachers, I know from speaking to so many and seeing, and our parents and just the world at large, is there's the reality of people's life and this like constant going and doing and stress level. So just to kind of play, I don't want to say devil's advocate, but what can maybe educators do if, they really do want to get in touch with their story and show up differently, but they don't know when to even fit this into their already insanely busy life? What would you say to somebody with that concern or block?
Yeah, it's valid. I have the utmost respect for teachers. I could never be a teacher. I don't know how they do it during the school year, especially the last, 19 months with COVID. It's even more amazing. But ironically enough, over the many years of my practice, I've always had a good chunk of my clients are teachers. And so the teachers that stop and make time for themselves 50 minutes a week to work on themselves do better in the classroom, cope better with being in school and the stressors of being a teacher every day. So people say they don't have the time, but what are you spending your time doing? Are you saying, no, I need my hour of Netflix every night because without it, I'm going to fall apart? Like, that's where that love part of the spiral healing comes in. That's where the self-care part comes in. So teachers are giving all day long. But if they don't stop and give to themselves, they're giving from a dry well and have nothing left to give. So what I want to say is you just have to do it, like that famous ad says, but it's the truth. Because it's scary to think about going to talk to a therapist or a coach, but it's only going to be scary the first time. Just like anything new, once you do it, you're like, well, that wasn't so bad. Unless, of course, maybe you're jumping out of an airplane, which I won't do. So it's okay. It's hard. I get it. I know. I don't ask anyone to do the work I haven't done. But I also know that people can feel better and do better at work, but it means making yourself a priority in a way that's healthy emotionally.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in around that as my background as a teacher. Before I did meditation, as opposed to now when I do meditation and the results within myself and the children as well, it's been astounding. So I used to have children just kind of jumping all over the place, having a great day. The room was a bit chaotic. I was still learning as well. So it wasn't just like, that wasn't the only reason, but I was just still getting my groove around teaching. But then when I noticed after I did a lot of what I call awakening processes, really deep meditation, not just light meditation, but really, really just saying, okay, I need to change, like not just for the children, for my life, for myself. I need to physically change myself because I want to be better. So the moment I did that, everything else in my life improved. And the classroom improved. And it wasn't like I had to do anything then. There was no work I needed to do because my presence had moved to a place of peace within. And so that was sort of like, my heart was able to transmit that. I don't know, there's probably some special term that you both know for this, but my heart was able to transmit that out to other people, and they could understand that and feel that. And then they would also be feeling calm as well, like mirroring, I think is what it's called, or something like that. And yeah, I really think it's really profound. And I feel like it's really simple to do. Like it doesn't take that long, like even just doing it before you go to sleep at night, just for a few minutes. That's how I trained myself. You can put on an audio for 5 minutes a day even. And it's all of those little things that you do, it will start to change you. And the more that you are changing, the more you're going to be helping the children as well. And also being able to just have joy in your life and happiness, and a happy classroom, a fun classroom. Like I am the funniest teacher. Like I like to play all day. Like I'm like a child, you know, but I think that comes because my heart is open and I want that for the children. I just want them to be happy the way that I want to be happy as well. So I think that's super important what you were sharing. I want to also share about the vision for a new paradigm of education. So I've been asking all of our guests this because it really excites me. And I feel like every single person who is joining us on this podcast and on this mission has a beautiful heart for children and a heart for the world. So I wonder, what would you say would be a vision for humanity or for education, or what would be your message around that? Or parenting? Yeah.
I would love to change the focus. I would love to get the focus off teaching to the test. I would love to get the focus off, this very, what's the word? Strict is not the word I want, but I can't get the right word. Narrow way of looking at education, because schools say, oh, we're going to do social emotional learning. It's like 1 hour a month. I'm sorry, that doesn't count. We had something called Family Connect Night. They started in our district a few years ago. So district wide, no homework that night, so families can do things together. So I said to my daughter, who's a junior, I don't at all micromanage her. I was just like, oh, you have any schoolwork tonight? Just dinner conversation. And she goes, no, it's Family Connect Night. But of course, we were all going in different directions. I didn't know it was Family Connect Night. I paid more attention to it when it was elementary school. I'm like, oh, did you want to do anything? She goes, no, my Family Connect Night is that I'm going to be alone in my room. I was like, cool, you do you. But like, it has to be more than that. Like, these kids are killed with, I just think, work that isn't meaningful, and isn't giving them any real life skills. So I think schools need to do more real life skills stuff, like what's it like to buy a house? How do you go to a trade school? What's an Excel sheet, and how do I do Quicken or QuickBooks or something to manage my banking? How do I save money? How do I build a relationship with friends? How do I keep my friends after high school? How do I make new friends when I'm in college? What do I do when I have big feelings? How do you find a therapist? How do I find my first doctor if my mom's not there to help me? Like, adulting. That's what my husband and I talk about with my older 2 children. We call it adulting, like adulting 101. We've been saying this since they've been going into college. And now my daughter, who lives on her own and is in graduate school, she'll text my husband and say, I need to have an adulting lesson, and I think that we need to start that. Not that we would call it adulting in elementary school, but that really building self-reliance. Not you're going to get in trouble if you don't do your homework, but how are you going to feel about yourself when you do? And shift that emotional lens from punitive because I think that's what it is right now, right? You get a 0, you get a big red circle on your page, to a growth mindset. Where did you succeed in this homework? Yeah, you missed 5 or 6, but what was the success? And how do you learn from that? And I think if that's the shift across all the grades, I think that could be transformative for everyone. Because even how much better experience would it be for teachers, instead of saying, oh, you got this wrong, that wrong, that wrong, and the other thing wrong, if the teacher was encouraged by the school districts to say, sit down with your students and talk to them about what they got right and what enabled them to get it right. That would be huge. But that doesn't happen right now, mostly. Even though I'm sure there are some teachers out there that are amazingly doing this on their own, behind the scenes.
I wanted to add in one more thing around what you've shared. I think it's beautiful, but I also want to take it one step further, because I really believe a new paradigm of education is a debunking of all of that. Okay, that's brilliant. Like, that's so brilliant. But I'm going to go a step further and just share what we shared together on our other call, which I think was really beautiful, was what you were sharing around kind of this idea of the growth mindset and the goals, that envisioning that for children, and also what you apply with your adult, whatever you call them, clients or learners, that you never gave them a set toolkit. You had some ideas for them and you placed it back onto them, and you said, well, you know what, it's not ABC or CBA, it's what do you need? And I really feel that this is the merge of the new paradigm. It's letting go of expectation. It's letting go of everything that, you know, we imagine, like you're saying, with these boxes and check boxes and right and wrong and all of that. It's this allowance and this space for almost what is needed within that person to then become what is success. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, what we were talking about. Do you remember that? We were talking about how you said when you were sort of providing that with somebody, that I said to you, can you give me some tips? And you're like, well, not really, because because it's different for every person, you know. Would you be able to just expand on that? Because I think that's so useful for what our children need as well. And it just, that really lit me up. I was like, yes, that's it.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to what Jen was saying in the beginning about this individual plan for each student, right? What's going to work for them? That there's not a recipe with specific ingredients. Maybe there are lots of ingredients. Which ones do you need? But the child becomes empowered to pick those. I need more time. I need to sit closer to the board. I need to use my fingers to do math, you know, whatever it is. I need lined paper. I'm not sure. But I think making it individual, like really getting to know each kid.
And the kid,
you know, but that means school has to be structured different, right?
Yeah, well, the first thing you said, though, I think about how you would want school to be different is to teach like self-awareness. And that is what I'm hearing again right now, right? Just for the teacher, for the student, and how empowering that is. So for the way I envision it, based on what you're saying, and you too, Monique, is almost, and again, paralleling mindfulness and therapy, is in the classroom too, having this mirror almost in front of the child, where he or she can, or they can start to really see, like, oh, I do well with this, and this lights me up, and then connecting, seeing even their facial expressions as they're doing certain tasks or projects, or connecting with others, because that cannot be understated enough too, I think, or overstated, just that power of connection, right? And there's such a doing that goes on. And I think, you know, Monique is feeling that right now from you. And we're both living in Long Island, which is probably the most frenetic place on earth, and the tremendous pressure that is on everybody here, and the pace. And so we weren't brought up that way, and it hasn't been generationally probably ever in our line. So it's so new. And so it's been such a beautiful journey, I think, for both Monique and me to see both sides and have such respect for one another, of this understanding of how we were just raised differently, both culturally, and where you come from just really does have such a huge impact, and in the States, the philosophy is like, you go to college and then you get a job. Whereas in a lot of places around the globe, it's very much, no, get out and travel. And that's part of, it's very common. And so it's just really, there's a lot of shifting from doing to being that needs to happen. And so it's not going to happen overnight. So I think I keep seeing like these small little tangible steps are, I think, really essential to get people to sort of rewire their brain so that then they can see and feel exactly what Monique is talking about, that power of when you just show up with joy and slow down, that's more impactful than any tool that you can implement. But because of the way our brains are wired and habitually and intergenerationally, I think we need to first kind of start with that maybe mindful minute and then have that feeling of, whoa, what was that? Because the first time I guide people through a little visualization or mindfulness practice and they've never experienced that, even a 30-second guided mindfulness exercise is so huge, probably more than anything else, because they really feel for the first time what stillness is like, right? So I hope that makes sense in connecting to what you were saying, Janet.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it makes me think about it, and you were talking about mirroring earlier also. It makes me think about polyvagal theory. And I don't know if you're aware of polyvagal theory, but polyvagal theory was, it's been in the medicine field now for 30 years, developed by Dr. Stephen Porges, and it's all about the vagus nerve, which runs from the base of our skull all the way down our spine, and that's what keeps us in emotional regulation or puts us into emotional dysregulation. So that fight-flight response, everyone knows about that, freezing, or calm and connected. And so when we're bringing meditation into schools, right, and we're taking a mindfulness minute, what we're doing is we are physiologically moving ourselves from fight flight, which is happening here in the chest area, into calm connected, which happens up here in the prefrontal cortex of our brain, where we can, and our limbic system can calm down. So as a teacher, if your nervous system is regulated, you're mirroring to your students a regulated nervous system, which helps the students regulate their nervous system. If you come in dysregulated, all frenetic, maybe from your drive for work, or you just got out of a staff meeting, and you don't take that 30 seconds before you walk into the classroom to go, really long exhale, you're walking into your classroom dysregulated. Guess what? The kids in the class are going to also be dysregulated or become dysregulated because you're dysregulated and you can't connect. Because this happens through neuroception, which is everything that's happening that we are picking up in our surroundings with the people around us, the energy around us, the environment, without conscious awareness. Our nervous system just reads it. We don't even realize it. So that mindfulness is actually physiologically so important. And understanding polyvagal theory in connection to mindfulness, in connection to be connected with ourselves, safe and secure, to be connected with others, safe and secure, I think that's also huge. And teachers can learn like 1 minute mindfulness. I've gone into companies and taught a workshop on 1 minute mindfulness techniques and stress reduction. And people have gotten back to me. They're like, wow, Janet, I use that technique. It works like this. You know, we set it up, I teach them, they use it, it's done. And teachers can learn that too.
I love that.
I think there's science behind it, which is why I think, I wanted to bring that up. And also the fact that we can create new neural pathways in the brain, right? That's
I'm really glad that you brought that up about the polyvagal theory. And I think, I'm someone who wants to know everything about science and everything. And it just doesn't end though. And the good news though, is that there are so many ways to get to that place of regulation. So whether it's breathing, breath work, whether it is looking at the clouds rolling by, whether it is, getting lost in flow with your music or your art, whether it is going on YouTube and looking up polyvagal techniques, because there are some really simple ones and you don't have to know any of the science behind it. Same thing with tapping. Now there's the Tapping Solution app and Headspace. And so you don't have to, be a nerd and never sleep and read everything like I do. You can, somebody has really cut all of that out for you so you can have a really busy life and just go to the Calm app or go on YouTube and find these amazing videos, like energy healing too. There's some simple ones by putting, your one hand on your forehead and the other one on the back of your head. That really can help a lot in terms of your meridians. And I love that you also brought up the sort of the energy exchange that we don't realize, and it's funny, last night I kept saying to my son, let's take responsibility for the energy that we're bringing into the room and the house and the world. And I'm trying to plant these seeds, and we haven't really thought this way. And me as a scientist, I haven't either, but now I love that there's so much science to really support this. And I think it's really going to have a huge impact and influence on accessibility in terms of schools and the healthcare systems and corporations, because now we really do have the science that is needed to get funding and all of those things. So that's really cool that now we know that we can measure that. And otherwise, if we don't address it, then not only are we not transmitting that calm energy and that peace to our students, but it's just this back and forth volley that is not going to stop. And so the other piece of the research there is the irony that the parents and the teachers and the administration and everybody wants these kids to get good grades and learn, but nobody's learning anything except how to escape from their life for a moment, maybe. And so the research is astounding as far as mindful, all of these techniques, that a little bit goes a long way in terms of improving the grades. So really everybody wins in terms of what they want is the end result, but it's change, and change is really hard for a lot of people, right?
Yeah. And the other thing, just to tap into and add on to what you're saying there, just for a smidge, if someone's nervous system is dysregulated and they're in fight or flight, when you're in fight or flight, you actually can't use your executive functioning. So if you have a student sitting in class who's all, I'm doing motions looking like I'm stressed out, who's all stressed out and anxious and just wants to run and flee, their executive functioning to learn whatever the teacher wants to teach is not online. The two cannot happen simultaneously. So maybe the mindfulness, the awareness of that fight-flight response and how it affects executive functioning and learning would be so amazing to bring into education, because maybe the kid is not paying attention and daydreaming, but is maybe in a state of fight or flight, and it wouldn't matter if the teacher was sitting right next to the student at their desk. The kid wouldn't get it in that moment. So bringing your students into regulation in whatever way you do it, like you said, looking at nature, playing music, have a quick dance party with little kids, walk around the classroom a few times, a few deep breaths, bringing those kids into regulation brings executive functioning online, then they can learn without stress. Oh my God, learning without stress. How beautiful would that be?
Yeah, and now, compared to when I grew up, we now know a lot more with the brain, and the executive functioning is not really up to speed until around age 24, 25. So even when kids are regulated, actually, the expectation for what we expect as adults of them is there's such a disconnect. And I think that's where a lot also of those blocks that you mentioned earlier, I would imagine, come from with the self-worth and the guilt. We're expecting them to do things that developmentally and neurologically they're just not wired to do. So it's about getting that education, and that's why for me, finding that balance of, yes, I love the research because I think it's really powerful and it helps me to understand, but then also that being and learning to still myself. And so that has come into my life much more recently, and that's my practice of where I do the work, but I model, that's part of my story. And I think that's why it's still such a practice that I need to work on, because I'm constantly modeling that for everyone else. That, look, it's hard for me too, but let's all take a breath and pay attention to our thoughts, because those two just kind of keep on looping, right? And paying attention energy, tell ourselves, right? I think Stanford University said 80% of our thoughts are negative, and that they're almost exactly the same each day. So it's like, but if you don't realize that, we just keep doing it. So it's self-awareness is huge. And that's probably why you mentioned it first when you started talking, Janet.
Probably. And we're not our thoughts. That's the other thing people get wrong. We are not our thoughts. Our thoughts are just something we think. So when you can separate that, and that brings me back to ego, right? And realize, oh, these thoughts are not real. Our brains are always firing. So we're going to have things we think, but that doesn't mean we are that.
I love that. I've actually studied that in meditation, and I love hearing it more from a clinical perspective from both of you, because as you said, Jen, I've had it more from a presence of being that, as opposed to studying what it is doing to me. It's just like I become this. But what I wanted to share is I think it's so brilliant around the curriculum. And when we were writing the New Paradigm of Education book, there's just so much research out there that backs up the meditation and mindfulness is necessary. Like, it's not even an option, it's actually necessary for children, and it fits into the curriculum in so many areas. It's just like, if they could just tweak it slightly, it wouldn't even be much, like a slight little tweak. I've read through, like, I know the Australian curriculum, I don't know all of the world curriculum, but I was reading through it and I was like, they just need to add in one extra little checkpoint there and it's covered, because they talk so much about social emotional learning, and it's just going that step beyond and placing it against science as well. There's all these different science. It actually ticks a lot of boxes for science. It could be a cross-curricular process if they're wanting to systemize it in that way. Not that I'm saying that I want a system in any way. That's not what my envision is. But if it's going to be an easy, simple way of adding it in, I can actually see it's possible and the results are there. So I think it's just such a brilliant way. And I feel like there's more and more and more people in the world that are waking up to that. Even corporations, businesses, everybody's using it in some kind of format in their life to improve getting better results, which ultimately is, feeling happy within. I feel like that is what I would measure success as ultimately for anybody, for a child or for an adult or whatever. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to say thank you so much to you, Janet. And I also just wanted to check in with you and see how we could reach you, or if there's any other offerings you have that could help us in any way before we finish.
Oh, thanks. The best way to reach me is my website, which is janetphilbin.com. You can find links to all my social media there. If you are interested in my book, there's a free download of the first chapter. You can have that. I also have 2 courses that are connected to my book. One's a book club discussion course. So for like less than $50, you get like 9 hours of content. And then I have a deep dive course into the spiral of healing, which really, we spend 1 hour, so it's 4 hours, breaking it down and really digging into it. And I put in both courses extra content of things, PDFs that were not included in the book. So there's extra bonuses in there. But yeah, anyone can reach out, ask a question, and find me. I'm pretty findable.
Thank you so much, Janet.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. What a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was amazing to tie in your work. It's so needed and necessary for parents and for educators and for children, especially in the new paradigm. And it's been a pleasure to collaborate with you. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to all our listeners for tuning into our podcast of the New Paradigm of Education. If you're wanting to join our Facebook group, we have a Facebook group called A New Paradigm of Education. And if you're wanting to reach out to Janet, Jen, or myself, our links will be placed down in the bottom here. And I want to close with my favorite saying of all time, which is Mahatma Gandhi's, "Be the change that you wish to see in this world." Okay, namaste.